The second part of topic 3 looks at the various biomes, both globally and in Australia. So the natural ecosystems that occur in different parts of the world can be grouped together into biomes. Common examples are deserts, tropical rainforests, savannas, temperate forests, tundra, and taiga. We'll look at these and compare what biomes we have in Australia. So a biome is a collection of ecosystems with similar climate, soil, and plant composition. Climate's the main influence on the type of vegetation that develops. The most important climatic variables are temperature and rainfall, or more correctly precipitation, and any seasonal variation of both. A key component in the relationship between climate and vegetation is the soil. A good example of two similar biomes on two different continents is the southwestern South African biome and the southwestern Australian biome. In both regions, the climate, soils, and plant types are similar, although not the same species. In South Africa, the type of vegetation is called fynbos, which is translated into fine bush. These are plants with fine leaves. In Western Australia, the vegetation is called quangan. In both cases, the climates are similar. They are both Mediterranean temperate climates with warm summers, cool winters, and winter rainfall. In both cases, the soils are infertile sands. And in both cases, the vegetation is mainly woody shrubs, mostly with small leaves and small colourful flowers. But they're not the same species across the two biomes in Western Australia and Southern Africa. Understanding what constitutes a biome and how it relates to the plants growing in it is very important to growers of plants. The biome characteristics determine its potential for agriculture or horticulture and the strategies for growing plants. In general, the greater the difference between a crop production system and the pre-existing biome, the more difficult it is to sustain that system or to grow the crop. Sometimes it may even prove to be impossible. So the first of the biomes is tropical rainforests, which are found globally and in Australia. So the climate in tropical rainforests is warm and moist year-round. They have the highest biological diversity. They're dominated by evergreen broadleaf trees, and there are some woody vines which are called lianes or lianes, and there are also quite a lot of epiphytes. An example is orchids, which grow on trees. Of all biomes, tropical rainforests are the most photosynthetically productive. However, the soils are nutrient poor. The agricultural potential is high, but only for a few years, and the productivity decreases rapidly as the soil is depleted. And a good example is what we've been seeing on the television recently regarding the deforestation in the Amazon forests. On the other extreme is the desert biome, also found globally and in Australia. Interestingly, these are the largest biome on the planet. Deserts are very dry. They experience hot days and cool nights with rapid changes in temperature. They have very low fertility soils, and the plants found there are highly specialized for this biome, and they grow very slowly or they grow intermittently. With respect to the agricultural potential, it is very low. One would require irrigation and fertilization. Desert soils are also difficult to manage because of salt accumulation in the soil if irrigation is used. Savannas and grasslands are also global and Australian biomes. Soils have some organic matter and nutrients, more so in some savannas elsewhere in the world, less so in Australia. Rainfall varies with season. The vegetation is usually limited by availability of water, by fire, and by grazing animals. Now, these savannas and grasslands were favored by early people for cultivation because of the relatively fertile soils and the grasses for grazing. The agricultural potential is high if the soils have not been depleted or eroded. Irrigation would be necessary in dry periods. Similar salinization issues to desert biomes exist. The dry regions can easily be turned to desert if they are overgrazed. So, next biome is temperate forests. Now, these biomes in Australia are dominated by eucalypts and shrubs of the Epicredaceae, Myrtaceae, Rutaceae, Fabaceae, Proteaceae, and Cyperaceae botanical families. Photosynthetically, temperate forests are very productive, but only for parts of the year. Soils have a shallow organic and nutrient-rich area. The agricultural potential is high, again, only for a few years. And of course, the potential decreases unless the soils are managed properly. Another of the common biomes globally is boreal coniferous forest, also known as the taiga. This is globally the second largest biome after deserts. However, these only occur in the colder regions of the extreme northern hemisphere and therefore are not present in Australia. Now, they consist mainly of coniferous trees and there is very low plant diversity. The climate is very cool and wet. They have long winters and short growing seasons. And they have very low biological diversity. Soils are nutrient poor. In terms of agricultural potential, it's actually quite low for large-scale production. Small farms can be productive, but with limited growing seasons. And these biomes are mainly used for harvesting, for timber, or for paper production. Another extreme biome is the tundra, which is also found only in the extreme northern hemisphere. Again, like the boreal forests, tundra does not occur in the southern hemisphere and therefore not found in Australia. This is where we find the permafrost, where the ground is permanently frozen below the soil surface. However, warming global temperatures are therming the permafrost, which has been causing unstable ground. It's been causing decomposition of organic material, and this has been releasing carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. The tundra has a very short season where plants grow, and these are mainly dwarf shrubs, sedges, and grasses. There's almost no prospect for crop production in the tundra, so the agricultural potential is very low. So all biomes are affected by human activity, and that human activity began several thousand years ago. The most affected have been the grasslands because of their agricultural potential. So, much of the grasslands and temperate biomes have actually disappeared in many regions of the planet. They have been harvested and or converted to farmland. One of the most pervasive causes of change has been the widespread practice of land drainage. These drainage systems have radically changed many biomes that contained wetlands. And we've now realized that wetlands play a large role in ecosystem stability. They act as buffer zones and they provide refuge for many species. So, in some parts of the world, these wetlands have been restored. Human activity through crop production has replaced natural ecosystems. This has now resulted in new biomes, some of which are rice paddies, pastures, farm fields. The problem is that nearly all potential cultivated land is now already used. But we still need to increase food production, and we also need to improve the diversity of the human diet, particularly in developing countries, where they tend to depend on a limited range of dietary components. It's not really possible to increase land use, so what are our options? One option is that we might increase crop yields through breeding high-yielding crops, improved use of inputs, more efficient farming systems, again, especially in developing countries. There are other options. One potential option is to do high technology production. An example is that we might produce tomatoes in greenhouses in the cold taiga or tundra regions, but this requires heating. Possible in Iceland, probably less so in Alaska. Alternatively, we could utilize greenhouses to grow tomatoes in desert regions, but this requires water. So in some parts of the world, including Australia, these practices have been carried out successfully. Something else we could do is to exploit microclimates more. So within biomes, there are microclimates. Now these differ from the biome because of local features, such as hills, valleys, bodies of water, land masses, or buildings. They can be warmer or colder, hotter or cooler, wetter or drier than the biome in general. They can be utilized to grow plants that may not do well in the prevailing biome conditions. For example, landscapers growing plants nearer to buildings which collect the warmth, or planting windbreaks to provide shelter and create microclimates for orchard crops, or growing near large bodies of water which moderate the local climate, or avoiding planting in frost pockets, or planting on slopes to avoid frost collection, or planting on northwest facing slopes to benefit more from the late afternoon warmth, or for example planting at higher elevation for cooler conditions. However, these are all quite limited in scope and land area, but they should be exploited. Another major consideration in crop and natural ecosystems is that plants sequester carbon dioxide in their biomass. So this is known as the plant's photosynthetic productivity. However, plants also respire and they expel carbon dioxide. So the difference between the sequestered and the expelled carbon dioxide is known as the net photosynthetic productivity, or the net primary productivity, NPP. So the NPP is the amount of carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. And so this emphasizes the importance of natural ecosystems and also the need to include as many processes of the natural ecosystem in crop ecosystems. So some descriptions of biomes can leave the impression that they consist of communities of plants and other organisms that would always be there in the absence of human interference, and that they are stable. However, we know that organisms have evolved, landforms have changed, and climate has varied over time. So the change in plant communities over time is known as succession of plant species. So this is described as development of vegetation from a blank slate. For example, a rock surface, a pool of water, or bare soil. So these might be caused by natural causes such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or passage of a glacier. Or more recently, they may be caused by human activity. It is a process of colonization by plant species into a new environment. And these species are known as pioneer species. Niches are filled in the ecosystem. Ultimately, this stabilizes to some extent with the climax community. However, changes do continue, albeit at a slower rate. So this succession has implications for crop production. Crop ecosystems are maintained by humans at what is an early succession stage. What this does is provide niches for invaders. So what we do is we invite colonization by other species, weeds, pests, and diseases. And because of that, it requires additional work and inputs to control the pests, the weeds, and the diseases. So, making more use of natural ecosystem processes would assist in reducing these inputs and the extra work. In the next section of this topic, we will look into some more detail about the effect of the human footprint on ecosystems.